Hi, my name is Michelle Brennan. I am the OER Information Services Manager at ISKME, and I work a lot on the OER Commons platform, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. I work a lot on our metadata and interoperability of our resources with other services and platforms. So this is a presentation that I had originally given at the LRMI Metadata Meetup at the end of July in Washington, D.C., and it is now being recorded. So to tell you a little bit about OER Commons. This is a project of ISKME. It was created in 2007, and we have been organizing resources with a robust amount of metadata for about 7 years now, and we are an incredibly iterative team and support educators in developing their educational practice, as well as professional development and road mapping for administrators and curriculum development teams. So we work with a lot of educators at a lot of different levels of the education system. And really central to this is the resources and the resource metadata. So OER Commons is a platform. It's a digital content hub. It has over 50,000 high-quality resources. We also have group collaboration features, and we have an authoring tool. We have a really diverse client base. We support education from K to 20, both inside and outside of classrooms and across 5 continents. So one of our biggest challenges and one of our biggest inspirations is really understanding how we can make our content relevant for many different contexts, since we have such a diverse number of users. It's really important for us that our content is high quality, so we put a lot of effort into vetting that content and making sure that the metadata associated with that content is really high quality and is really robust. So I want to talk a little bit about the ways in which we use metadata to support educators in accomplishing their goals, and how we engage educators themselves in this work, and then how work is shared back to the community. So this graphic here represents the OER Commons user engagement model. Discover, curate, and author are the 3 main calls to action that we give educators when they visit our site. So in the Discover resources, we have a rich set of descriptive data that we call our metadata record. And each resource has a metadata record. And people are able to filter on these and find, drill down to exactly what they want. This includes things like terms of use, but it also includes things such as educational standards like the NGSS and the CCSS. And in Curate, teachers and students and other users, they're able to enrich this metadata. So when people go through and they make collections of resources themselves, they often are adding tags. These tags can be keywords, these tags can be alignment standards, these tags can also be specialized tags that folks add that add sort of the stamp of approval of a certain type of institution. They can also rate materials with one of our rubrics, which I'll cover a little bit later in the presentation. They can add reviews in the comments. And then they can also share out those collections of resources that they've put together and all of the metadata that they've created. In the authoring step, people are able to actually create resources themselves and content, and they can also create the metadata that goes with that content. And I'll also cover that in the presentation a little bit later. So it's really important for us to provide many ways for users to contribute their knowledge, pieces of content. And we've built a really robust metadata ecosystem which leverages all of this metadata. And we bring all of this metadata into one consistent record for each source that we find or that we create or is contributed. And this makes them really accessible, easily findable, and in some cases contextualizes them in a way that helps people understand them in a new way. We work really hard to keep our metadata high quality and consistent and very well organized by our digital librarians and our metadata technicians. And what I want to talk about today is the way in which this ecosystem functions. It functions so that our metadata is active. That means it's always being updated. It's collaborative. That means that not only is OER Commons staff and librarians updating that metadata and creating that metadata, but our users are as well. And we see this sort of as a cyclical process of improvement and evolution of resources. And I'll give some concrete examples of that too in this presentation. I want to move to the next slide, which is an introduction to the OER Commons metadata profile. I'll give you some examples of the types of metadata that we support and sort of how our schema functions. So these circles represent the three main types of data that we collect about resources. So microdata is something that is available within resources themselves. It's actually in the HTML markup of all of our resources as they appear on our website. The microdata also travels with resources when they are exported in something like SCORM or HTML. You can download the some of the resources, our open author resources, in packages and take them with you. We support LRMI markup on all of our resources, so all 50,000 of them. And we use some schema.org properties as well. Something like the review object is used to accommodate reviews that people have given resources with one of our rubrics. We also support A11Y and AFA, both in our metadata and in our microdata. So if you create a resource on OER Commons, there will be accessibility microdata that will travel with that resource wherever it goes. Our metadata is the informational architecture behind the resources. And our metadata record is something that's separate from, but really at the heart of what our resources are. And it's really flexible and it's grown with time. So it's a pastiche, if you will, of all of our project work with partners, with clients, and also ongoing work in the field. For example, we started out as a modified alum, and we've grown and accommodated the some fields that support the CELT framework. So if you are a state and you want your resources to be shareable with other states, we can help you do that because we support that metadata schema. We also have added in some pieces like ASN. So if you have a lot of resources that have standard alignments and you'd like to be able to share those alignments with other systems, we're also able to assist you with that. And the third circle is paradata. Paradata is data that really enriches the resource and sort of is very important for contextualization of the resource. So these are our two things, like the Achieve rubric and the Equip rubric, and also other comments that users leave. These will tell you what a resource, you know, how a resource has been used in the classroom, you know, what's easy, what works, what could be improved, and the comments also will sort of give you a really detailed explanation of any of the scores or ratings that are given in either rubric. So in the next slide, I'm going to move to, we're going to talk a little bit about how we use metadata to support search and discovery. So this is an example of one of our resources, and it is a science resource. It was actually provided to us by the National Institute of Health. They provided a large collection of resources, and now this collection of resources has been mapped to the OER Commons metadata schema, and we've added LRMI markup to this resource so that it can be found on the web. And we've also added all of our OER Commons metadata schema fields, such as the CELT fields and the AFA fields, which means this resource now is shareable with and contextualized for a wider audience than maybe it was previously, because we've added all of that extra metadata. So folks are able to come to the OER Commons and they're able to find this based on fields such as audience, which is that this is meant for students or teachers. They can come here and they can look for the media format. They can also come here and look for the access mode. So this is a visual resource. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the way in which we add new contexts to resources. So like I said before, when this was provided to us, it was provided to us as a science resource. And that is the way that we cataloged it. That's the way the provider contextualized it to us. However, one of our users went through and used the Achieve rubric to evaluate this resource. And they aligned it to the NGSS, the Next Gen Science, and they also aligned it to a common ELA literacy standard. They also gave a review of how the teacher used this in a ELA classroom. This is actually one of the first results that you'll find if you search for aligned ELA content. This has been used and rated by other users, and it has a very high rating as for use in an ELA classroom, which is really incredibly exciting for us to see. So the next step that we're going to talk about is contributing metadata, the ways in which we allow people to share and build resources. So what you'll see here is we have a number of providers. PhET is a great example. PhET is another LRMI compliant provider. It's been very easy for us to take their metadata that they provide to us, map it to our own schema, and then when it comes to OER Commons, we're able to allow users to add new paradata to that resource. And you can see here that this PhET resource has been aligned to 2 new math standards, and it's also been evaluated and reviewed by a user using the Achieve OER rubric. And then once we've enriched that metadata, all of our resources that have been evaluated with the Achieve rubric are then shared with the Learning Registry. So that means PhET gave us their resource, we added new metadata to it, and then we were able to share it with the Learning Registry with that new metadata and paradata that we'd added to it. Another example of the way in which we allow people to share and build is our group collections. So this is an example of a group who was doing all curation for grades kindergarten through 8th grade, actually. And they were doing it all for ELA resources that are tagged with Common Core standards. This particular group wanted to build their collection within OER Commons. It's very easy to search and discover resources and build them into collections, and then actually be able to transfer these collections to their learning management system. Because we use basic LRMI markup and LOM, as well as ASN in cataloging our standards, we were able to really easily share this with their LMS, and it is now actually searchable and discoverable within their LMS. So teachers who don't necessarily have any interest or time in doing this curation work are now able to access these right within their LMS. And the curriculum designers work with us at a higher level to create these collections that they can then share with their teachers. So the next step, the third wheel, is the authoring step. When users author resources, they are able to not only create the content, they can also adapt the content. And once users have created the content, other users can add new metadata to it. We also allow users to export to a number of different formats. One of those is SCORM, and another one is EPUB. All of the microdata within the resource itself is transferred to both SCORM and EPUB. And then the third circle that you see down here, the yellow circle, that represents an application that we use on our own website called Learner Options, which is an application that allows you to adjust the display and the way that you view resources others have created. And we use our own microdata within our resources to help facilitate that tool. So this is an example of the metadata which users are able to add when they create a resource. On the left-hand side, you'll see the user interface that users are using. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the microdata markup that then is created as part of the resource when users have finished and have published the resource. So in this way, we're dynamically always creating new microdata that's available on resources, and we're also capturing this metadata and adding that to our actual metadata record. So this is metadata that's available as part of the resource, and then the next slide I'm going to show you is microdata that is actually embedded in the resource text itself. This resource is a resource about force and pressure, and it has a lot of videos and it has a lot of pictures as demonstration. And we recognize that it's really important within a resource for folks who are using something like Learner Options, which I talked about in the previous slide, or other applications such as screen readers or other types of accessibility software, to have the microdata markup there right in the resource so that their technologies can leverage that microdata. So the microdata you see here on the right is actually within the text and the images of the resource itself. And this is where we really leverage the A11Y and AFA data. So that was kind of an overview of the ways in which we encourage users to use metadata, to contribute metadata, and then to create and adapt their own metadata. We are incredibly committed to the idea that metadata is not something that you put on a resource and it stays the same. We look at our metadata the same way we look at our content, in that it's constantly being remixed and added to and recontextualized. Thanks. So if you have questions or you'd like more information about any of the things that I've covered in this presentation, please feel free to email me directly and check out OER Commons for yourself.